Detailed case summary. Gregg v. Georgia is a landmark Supreme Court case from 1976 that addressed the constitutionality of the death penalty under the 8th and 14th Amendments. The case arose after Troy Leon Gregg was convicted of armed robbery and murder, receiving a death sentence under Georgia's revised death penalty statutes. Gregg challenged his sentence, arguing that the death penalty constituted a cruel and unusual punishment. The Supreme Court's decision ultimately upheld the constitutionality of the death penalty under certain guidelines. Background facts. Claimant plaintiff, Troy Leon Gregg defendant, State of Georgia. Facts of the case. In November 1973, Troy Leon Gregg and a companion hitchhiked and were picked up by two men, Fred Edward Simmons and Bob Dowd Moore. Gregg and his companion decided to rob the men, resulting in their deaths. Gregg was subsequently convicted of armed robbery and murder, and the jury imposed the death sentence under Georgia's revised death penalty statute, which included specific procedural safeguards intended to avoid arbitrary imposition of the death penalty. Arguments in the case. Petitioner's argument. Gregg argued that the death penalty constituted a cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the 8th and 14th Amendments. He contended that the death penalty was inherently arbitrary and capricious, and that it did not serve as a deterrent, nor was it an appropriate means of retribution. Respondent's argument. State of Georgia. Georgia argued that its revised death penalty statute provided sufficient procedural safeguards to ensure that the death penalty was applied in a fair and consistent manner. The state maintained that the death penalty served as a deterrent to serious crimes and was a legitimate form of retribution for heinous offenses. Final outcome and legal justification. Outcome. The Supreme Court, in a 7-2 decision, upheld Gregg's death sentence, ruling that the death penalty itself is not inherently unconstitutional under the 8th and 14th Amendments. Legal justification. Majority opinion. The majority opinion, written by Justice Potter Stewart, held that the death penalty is not inherently cruel and unusual punishment if applied under a system with procedural safeguards to prevent arbitrary and capricious sentencing. The court emphasized that the 8th Amendment must draw its meaning from the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. The court found that Georgia's revised statute, which required bifurcated trials, separate deliberations for guilt and sentencing, specific jury findings of aggravating circumstances, and automatic appellate review, provided sufficient safeguards against arbitrary imposition of the death penalty. Key concept. Implication. Gregg v. Georgia reaffirmed the constitutionality of the death penalty under certain guidelines, shaping the legal landscape for capital punishment in the United States. The decision underscored the importance of procedural safeguards in ensuring fair and consistent application of the death penalty. Key lessons. The death penalty is constitutional if applied under a system with adequate procedural safeguards. 8th Amendment interpretations evolve with societal standards of decency. Procedural reforms can address concerns of arbitrariness in capital sentencing.